Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Heidi Marke. She is a transformational life coach, author, and podcast host. Welcome to the show, Heidi.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
You are welcome. Welcome to the show. Welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are talking right now. We'll be talking about escaping the cycle of overwhelm and burnout. In this backdrop, we'll have our discussion. But first of all, let us understand a bit more about your journey so that people know who they are listening to.
So what would you like to know?
A bit about your background, about your journey.
Okay, so I'm 56, so I've lived quite a while. I have a granddaughter. I have two adult children. I've had previous different adventures in my life. The last adventure that leads to this one was a very pressured career as a mathematics teacher. I was responsible for well-being, coaching as well. And I thought I could find a way to make it all work better for me and better for those around me. But unfortunately, I spectacularly and unexpectedly managed to implode my life by burning out and eventually very suddenly deciding to quit a really hard worked for, once much loved career. And this has brought me to where I am now, because when I decided to go full time as a coach, I felt the need to build into my business the very foundations of doing things differently, finding a way to have success, which for me and my clients is well paid, meaningful work, and the ability to switch off, have fun, be well, and enjoy life. And so I built that very way of doing things into my business so that I couldn't burn out again. Because for me, it's very, very easy to get very excited, very driven, and push through overwhelm into exhaustion and get stuck in that well-worn cycle. I decided I had to do it without that. So I just went on a curious adventure while I healed my health. And that eventually became what is now known as the gentle rebellion, which is a different way of living fully, of having really successful work and life.
Right, right. Thank you for that, Heidi. Now, you are known as the gentle rebel coach. Help us understand a bit about this rebel and gentle. I'm very curious to understand this.
Yeah, great question. So I love an oxymoron, and obviously gentle and rebel doesn't really go together, which is what I like about it, because it makes you think, what does it mean? And to me, if I look back at my life, I've always been naturally rebellious, but I've often taken a stand against things, and that costs energy, and it's loud, and I don't know, it's a different sort of energy than it's the kind of energy for me that contributed to burnout. And I wanted to do things differently. So the gentle rebellious way of doing things is more internal. It's much more solid, but it's much quieter. So it enables you, if you're one of those highly stressed, very professional people who wants to keep their hard-won respect at work, but sort their life out behind the scenes without having to make a declaration or take a big stand. It allows you to just say gently but firmly to yourself, I'm done with this normal way of doing things. I rebel. I choose to rebel against the traditional route to success. I'm done with overwhelm. I'm done with exhaustion. I'm done with ruining my health. I'm going to gently but firmly rebel. And that just means saying mainly to yourself, I choose myself.
Right, right, Heidi. So, gentle rebellion, this sort of, many people say, do not keep pent up feelings because that can impact you negatively. Is this rebellion, the gentle rebellion, different than that sort of a pent up feelings? How does that work? A lot of people feel that we should speak out, speak their heart out. It can be, whatever it is. And here you are talking about a bit, keeping things to yourself in a positive manner. But can it also turn into negative anytime? Or is it better to keep this sort of secrets to yourself?
That's a great question. I like that one. So what it involves is acknowledging, this is how I feel. This is what's going on for me. but without having to declare it. Because when you're exploring it, you don't really know. You don't want to have to be saying, well, this isn't working for me at work, we need to change everything. That's a big amount of energy. And when you're low on energy, if you take your attention from trying to solve the world or treating yourself as a problem to be solved, and instead just go within and quietly ask, what am I feeling? What's really going on for me? What then happens is we move from everything being a problem to be solved, including ourselves, to, oh, this is all just useful information. So it's about acknowledging the feelings without having to shout about them. It's very powerful because it takes the power back to you, and it requires less energy, and we all need more energy, right?
Right, right, Heidi. Now let's talk about overwhelm. You talk about that overwhelm is optional. Why do we still choose the different option? We choose to become overwhelmed. If it's an option, why don't we choose something else rather than being overwhelmed? I want to understand that a bit more from you.
Yeah, so I see it as optional because, first of all, it's inevitable. So the human mind is easily overwhelmed. It's designed to be overwhelmed to keep us safe. So to me, overwhelm, as in not being able to think straight, feeling like you're pushing through concrete, you're like your poor brain's just getting to mush, not being able to see the wood for the trees, and a whole other myriad of symptoms the longer it goes on. So when you move into chronic overwhelm, it becomes harder and harder to ever let go of that way of thinking. We just become used to pushing through overwhelm, forcing ourselves to think, come on, get it together, you've got to think straight, So accepting that it's inevitable, because the human mind deliberately looks for everything that's wrong. It's very easily put into overwhelm by fear, and we are surrounded by fear-based messages. We are also easily overwhelmed by things like constant emails or constant demands on our time, and it can make us feel threatened without realizing it. And then we push through it because we think if we get to the end of our to-do list, if we sort that difficult person out, if we finish that project, everything will magically fall into place, and then we'll feel calm and at ease again. But it's not true, because first of all, you never finish your to-do list. And why would you want to? Because life's an adventure.
Right.
You want exciting things to do. But realizing that overwhelm's just the default setting, everybody's doing it, well, there's got to be a different way, because it's not a fun way of doing things. It's not the easiest way to do things. The mind thinks better when it's not overwhelmed. If you take the pressure off the mind, learn the skills of making it optional, you can then get into that beautiful flow state. You can actually hear your partner speak because you've not got all the rubbish going on in your head. You can switch off. You can switch between relaxing and enjoying your life and kick-ass focus at work. To be able to move between those two states is a skill really worth learning. And for me, it starts with acknowledging the overwhelm, choosing to make it optional, and then learning how to do that, which is what I teach.
Right, right, Heidi. Now, in our day-to-day lives, in our work life, in our personal lives, you know, generally we talk about, pushing the boundaries, and that is where you will excel. Why?
Mm-hmm.
But overwhelm is something else. We keep on pushing ourselves, thinking that we solve this thing, and then it will be back into that calm stage, but it does not happen. As they say, prevention is better than cure. How do we know whether we are moving towards excellence till that point, and beyond that it is overwhelmed and we don't? Is there, because it is not some, it is just an imaginary thing in our minds. How do we know we are crossing that we are getting into no man's land and then into enemy territory? How do we know for ourselves then, so that we can get back to the safer position already?
By paying really close attention to what's going on for ourselves. So instead of just pushing on through regardless, with the belief that, well, everybody's overwhelmed, so it's just the sacrifice I have to make to have a full life. It's about questioning that and saying, okay, if that's not true, when am I not overwhelmed? What do I want to feel like? When do I feel better? And noticing when you're working without overwhelm. So for example, the flow state is a perfect example. If you ever get into a state of flow with work, when time just seems to bend for you, you can get like a month's work done in 2 hours. When does that happen for you? Does it ever happen to you anymore? Did it used to happen to you? Or, for example, when you wake up in the morning, just noticing, often we wake up in the morning and it's like our minds are already out of the door before our bodies have even got out of bed, because the mind easily is overwhelmed. We can wake up being thought bombed by all the things we need to get done today. By simply moving your attention out of the mind with its crazy energy into the body, feeling our feet on the ground, allowing the belly to soften. Just notice how you feel. And the more you do this, the more you pay attention to what's going on for you, the more you can notice what's affecting you. And you just become very scared. Get to know yourself. It's self-awareness, it's self-acceptance. This is who I am. This is what supports me. This is what doesn't support me. I'm going to do more of what supports me. But the first step is the noticing, getting out of your head into your body. Notice what's going on for you.
Right. In workplaces, Heidi, people tend to look at other people giving so much of time to their work, and they think this is the norm. They start following that same thing, but everyone is made different. But they are following a track which someone, as they call workaholism or workaholics. A few are much more of these things. How do you then, within this workplace, set out this boundary for yourself, especially in today's time? It can be you can either become different, or you can become an outlier. How do you then deal with this situation and still make sure that you are a responsible worker, considered a responsible worker, and not being thinking all the time that others are working harder than me, and so I should not, I should continue to push my boundaries of my office duties?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it's most helpful to get away from the idea that the more you're at work, the harder you work. I mean, we know this not to be true, but as you say, when you look around you, it looks like some people are working harder. Are they? Who knows? Who cares? Stop looking at other people and look at yourself. Boundaries, I would argue, are not fixed things like I got very good at compartmentalizing before I burnt out. So it was like, well, if I stick to these hours at work and then I go home, I'll get my life back. But that didn't work because of work-life leakage. So I was over pushing myself to get stuff done at work, and then I take all the stress home. So it didn't really work. What works better, I have found, for myself and my clients, is instead to notice the boundaries for yourself. Boundaries are found, not made. They don't need to be built like
Right.
brick walls. It's 5 o'clock, I must go home. It's not about that. It might be about that for you. That might be one. But if the gentle, rebellious way of doing it is more secret than that. The boundaries are within. It's to do with how much energy and focus you're putting into something. It's about creating systems where you get to work in a way that works for you without having to ask for them or demand them, because that's when it gets really fighty and you get really feisty. I don't want to do overtime. I don't want to be here anymore. Well, that doesn't tend to work very well because it's pushing against something. Instead, I would invite you to look at what's good about your job, what does work about your job, what are you grateful for about having work, when do you work best, where do you feel appreciated, are you appreciating yourself, are you eating properly, drinking when you're thirsty, taking appropriate breaks when you can. It's about the how, it's not the what. We get very caught up. The mind likes a system, doesn't it? The mind likes one right solution for all time. If only we could solve the problem of work throughout the globe, where people never push into overwhelm and exhaustion. It doesn't work that way. As you quite rightly said, everybody's different. Know yourself. Don't pay attention to other people. Work out where's your energy going, where's your attention going, because if a lot of your attention is going on monitoring what other people are doing and whether it looks like you're doing enough work, or just telling yourself over and over again everything that's wrong, this isn't fair, everything, I'm exhausted, I don't feel well, why am I overworking when somebody isn't, like, you can do that, but how's that working out for you? I'd invite you instead to notice that, to acknowledge how you feel, to acknowledge how serious this is for you, that it's making you unhappy, that it's making you exhausted, that it's affecting your health, that it's affecting your home life. Notice it, acknowledge yourself, have self-awareness and self-compassion, get to know yourself, and then practice gratitude. You have a job. What does it
Right.
provide? And how can you start moving through your day with more self-awareness and self-compassion? Take good care of yourself within what you've got before starting to take, really feisty stands against things, because it's just easier. It's easier to do things internally. So start with the easier. You'll be surprised that by how much energy you can get from changing your perspective.
Absolutely, Heidi. So, Heidi, now let me understand this relationship between overwhelm and burnout. Is there what is the relationship here? Are they very closely related? If yes, then how many days of overwhelm does it take to lead to burnout? Or it can happen just in a few days for some people. Help us understand this.
Okay, I see overwhelm as like the gateway drug to burnout, because overwhelm's easily dismissed. Everybody's overwhelmed. It's just how things are done. I'm just going to ignore it. I'll push on through. But that's it. And it doesn't always lead to burnout. And but burnout's not a actually defined term anyway. So it means different things to different people. I would argue that chronic overwhelm leads to burnout, leads to a situation where you're unprepared to push your body and your mind through that anymore. It's when we, for me and my clients, burnout is when we just stop caring. And for big-hearted, highly dedicated professionals, if you reach a stage where you're just done, you just don't care anymore, that's really sad. And ideally we want to deal with things before then. Now some people will say, oh, I burnt out and then I recovered, and I would argue, well, did you obviously had some deep exhaustion from overworking, but you recovered. Burnout's really hard to recover from. By definition, there isn't a definition, but if you look at the word burnt out, there's something very final about it, very serious about it. So I wouldn't get caught up in burnout. I just start with overwhelm because it's the easiest way, and I always want to take what's the easiest, most effective, smallest thing you can do that's going to have the biggest impact on your life. And I would argue deal with the burnout. Why? Because for me, one of the definitions, or one of the really strong signs and symptoms of overwhelm is when you think you've only got two equally rubbish options. And the options are often I push on through or I quit and downsize my dreams. Neither of those are acceptable if you want a full life. So by definition, if you think you've only got two really bad options, you're probably overwhelmed, because there are always more options than you can see. Deal with the overwhelm, and then you'll be able to see the easier ways to move through your day. It's a bit like with hindsight. If you looked back in a few years' time, or even 6 months' time, at where you are now, you would be able to see, oh, there were other things I could have done. There were other jobs I could have done. There were people I could have asked for help. I could have taken a holiday. Like, there are a million options we can't see. Overwhelm blocks all of the easier ways of doing things. Get the hindsight, the wisdom of hindsight now, by dealing with the overwhelm first. Get out of your head, into your body. Allow your system to reset. Notice how you feel. Know that there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with the situation. It's just feedback. The way you're moving through your day, if it's that hard that you're pushing against yourself, it's just time to do things differently. Because the truth is, pushing through overwhelm into exhaustion works. It's how we get to be successful. It works until it doesn't. And when it stops working for you, it's time to pay attention. Get to know yourself. Who am I? What am I up to? Is this how I want to live my life? Is this what I work so hard for? Is this why I passed all those exams and made all those sacrifices? No. So what do you want? How are you going to get it? Bring your attention back to you.
Right. And in this discussion, in this last answer, you talked about options. Let's look at the option of artificial intelligence, AI, in our lives. What's the role of technology, especially artificial intelligence, in overwhelm in today's time? Especially when people talk about AI and technology, they say it will free your time for yourself. But actually, if I see in several cases, it helps you in some aspects, but it is like it has increased your speed of running on the treadmill itself, rather than freeing yourself. Your boss knows that earlier what used to take 2 hours now can be done in 5 minutes, then they will start expecting more of you. But the same amount of work is actually taking the same amount of your mind space, 2 hours of understanding that 5 minutes of output. How do you think in this backdrop, how do we save ourselves from overwhelm when practically you are doing more work and less free time in your hands?
Thank you. I love that perspective on AI. Nobody's asked me that one before. I think we need to be really clear about what's brilliant about humans. Human
Right.
beings are amazing, much denigrated at the moment, but we are amazing. And the things that we want to do as humans, the really creative, highly adaptable things that we've always managed to do on the planet, the working together, the really human things, working with heart, with integrity, those things should be supported by AI. AI is there to do the boring, monotonous things that are soul destroying. That's what AI should be doing. That's how you could reduce overwhelm, because actually the deep meaningful work, the getting into a state of flow, if you can set up systems, and it's about knowing yourself and knowing which systems are going to work for you, and then really acknowledging the value of genuine human work, genuine ingenuity, because humans are amazing. So if you're not in a position, so you're employed, maybe it's harder for you to look at things this way, maybe other people are making decisions for you, then appreciate yourself, know yourself. What is it that you bring to the table as a human? That now AI is doing these boring jobs, frees you to do something, and how can you celebrate that, appreciate it in yourself? Because that's how we can work, by using AI rather than being crushed by it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Let's understand it now better through your book and your podcast. You have a book. You have written the book. Overwhelm is optional, and that you have also a podcast by the same name. Help us understand how have you dealt this particular subject in your book? What is it that you deal in your podcast?
Thank you. So the book is a very unoverwhelming book, because it was several hundred words, pages, and then I realized that it needed to be less. So I removed
Right.
all of the words you don't need. So it contains a lot of lovely space. It only contains the sentences you would have underlined and wanted to stick on your wall to remind you. So it's designed to make you feel seen and heard and understood. It's a great way to feel better, to understand yourself, and to see the options before you, to know that you are valued. So it's a beautiful small book with a lot of space, which makes space in your mind. That's people's experience of it. I feel seen and heard, and it's so spacious, it gives me space. So it's a beautiful little book available on Amazon. The podcast, which is now on 202 episodes, woohoo,
Right.
has a variety of things, from interviews with people, stories from my own life and how I rebuilt my life and my business through the Gentle Rebellion. It also has teaching episodes where I teach you how to get out of overwhelm, stay out of overwhelm, and live your life your way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's much to learn and understand from you, Heidi, and I'm sure a lot of people would like to connect with you and learn more about you, more from you, take your coaching. What's the best way for them to do so?
I would get to know me through my podcast if I was you, because there's nothing, I don't know about you, I love a podcast or a live stream. You really get to know people. So I would go to any of the platforms. Overwhelm is optional with Heidi Marke. And then I've also have a website where you can download free resources or find out about working with me. And that's just heidimarke.co.uk, or connect with me through LinkedIn, Instagram, or go to YouTube, all over the place. Love to hear from you. Always up for a Zoom cuppa if you want to chat about things.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's been so nice.